Thank you, Nevaeh. Anybody ever lose anything of importance? Anybody not? An article of clothing, car keys, your car. We together, Annie? I don't know how many times over the history of my life that I've walked out of like a mall or some crowded place and looked for my car and thought that somebody stole it, but it's been more than once, and it just makes me think the older I get, the more trouble I have, so I'm very vigilant about marking where I leave my car with signage these days. Sometimes when we lose things that are important to us, it causes our heart to sort of skip a beat until we can find it. How about at an amusement park or at a beach? Anybody ever like lose their kid?
Yes.
That's really, it's really frightening, especially, with such crowds like this or with such a vast body of water like this. It's very frightening when you lose something or someone of great value to you. How about, have you ever been lost? Anybody ever been lost? I must say to you, I've made a living of this over the course of my life. I am lost so much more frequently than I care to be. But one time, behind me is a place called Szeged, which is in Hungary. One time I was visiting in Hungary for 10 days. And outside of really sort of the city center in Budapest, as you move away from it, Szeged is towards the southern border near Romania and Serbia. And not a lot of people speak English. So if you get lost, it makes it that much more difficult to find your way, because you can't just stop and say, hey, I don't know where I'm going, could you direct me? You just get a lot of blank stares and you're like miming things to try and find your way. Well, one day I was with a group of students and we were in Szeged, and we were given the afternoon to just explore and have some free time. And when you know it, I got lost, horribly, miserably lost. I had been with the group for a while, but I sort of took off on my own. I just kind of wanted my own space and time. And at first, when you're in the city center, you can kind of use landmarks to find your way. But the more I moved away from it, I realized that before I knew it, I was absolutely horribly lost. And this was later in the afternoon, and the sun was starting to set, and I was thinking to myself, I'm going to be lost in Hungary in the dark and have no way to find my way back. And I was totally terrified, because I was in a very strange place. I had no idea where I was. I didn't speak the language, and there were no landmarks to help me. I don't know whether you've ever been in a space like that, but when you're lost, it's a very frightening thing. But you know what's more frightening than being lost and realizing it? Being lost and not realizing it. Because when you're lost and you know that you're lost, you at least have some semblance of understanding that you need help, that you need direction, that you need something to get you from point A to point B. But when you're lost and you don't know it, you can waste precious time, days, weeks, months, even years. And I feel like that's what some of us do, is that sometimes we get lost and we don't even know it. That what God's design for our life is and the way in which we're living, they're so totally separate. And we just, in some way, shape, or form, settle down into some lesser version of what God plans for us. We settle for status quo and living a very mediocre life. Some days are good days and we're happy about those, but for the most part, we get up and we go about our business and we just keep pressing replay. And my sense is that if we're not really clear about who we are, what we're about, and where we're headed, that it's very, very easy to get lost. And it's very, very easy to waste a lot of time. And this morning, what I want to talk with you about is the importance of having a clear vision for your life, for the life of this church, and why that is so significant for us. And I want to use a passage that Nevaeh actually just spoke to and read from Acts chapter 1 sort of as the backdrop for helping us to understand the significance of this in our own life. If you've not been with us since Easter, we've been talking about the importance of the resurrection in our lives. And we've been talking about how God's grand design is to take and to make all things new. That on the other side of the resurrection of His Son from a graveyard in Jerusalem, that His grand design and plan is that the resurrection would begin to be pushed forward and realized in the lives of others. In fact, all others. God wants and is in the process of making all things new. That means His earth and His people. Our minds, our eyes, the way that we think, the way that we live, our relationships, our jobs, our futures, our reputations. God's design for you and me is that He would take something that is broken, something that is defaced, something that is mediocre, something that has begun to settle for less, and to revive it, to renew it, to resurrect it, and to make all things new. That's God's plan. And in order for that to happen, there needs to be movement on a grand scale. Because it wasn't just about Jesus' immediate followers that He had intended lives would change. His plan was that for all time and all ages, that everyone on planet Earth would receive the same kind of power that raised Jesus from the dead, and that with that power would lead them into a new way of being and living. That's His plan. So, as Nevaeh read to you in Acts chapter 1, what Jesus is saying to His followers on the other side of His own resurrection is that as their life begins to take a different shape, He wants their lives to be about more than just themselves. He wants their lives to contribute to a larger plan. And so when He talks to them about the value of His own resurrection being made known to them, He also wants them to share it. The problem is they're lost and they don't know it. They are excited about what they have realized with Jesus. They thought He was dead. They thought that their hopes and dreams were dashed and gone. But now that He reveals Himself to them over a period of 40 days and begins to prep them for a time in which He will leave them and give them His Spirit, they're just focused on, they're focused on themselves. And I want to reread to you the passage because sometimes when you hear a text, you can hear it, but not hear it. I mean, it was just really 3 verses that Nevaeh read. 3 verses that if you weren't paying attention that you would probably miss, but I don't want you to because it's really, really important that if you're lost, you know it. And that if you're not, that you would be clear about who you are and where you are and what it is that you are about. Jesus says to His followers on the other side of His resurrection, says, the apostles were with Jesus and they kept asking Him this question, Lord, has the time come for You to free Israel and to restore our kingdom? Now, if you're reading that, you probably don't notice that they're asking a question that is totally fixated on themselves. Whose kingdom did they ask about? Our kingdom. Now, why was this important to them? It was important to them because their idea of a Messiah was one who would save and rescue them from the dreaded Roman Empire. They were tired of being Rome's lapdog. They were tired of being oppressed. And in their mind, they had looked towards the day when the tables would be turned and they would be the ones who were in charge. They would no longer be slaves. They would be free, and they would be in a position of power and authority. And so that's all they can think about. With the resurrection of Christ and the newfound power that he's offering to them, all they're thinking about is a political, a military, a human kingdom in which they're on top and not on the bottom. And you can't really blame them, because it's difficult when you've been enslaved for a long period of time to not want this. But Jesus is giving them a picture of something different, something greater. But they're lost and they don't know it. Why? Because their eyes are totally fixed on themselves. They're not thinking about anybody else. They're thinking about themselves. And that's a very narrow way to live. And he's going to tell them something that they need to hear, but they're not going to immediately hear it. Listen to what he says. They ask, "Lord, has the time come for you to free Israel and restore our kingdom?" And he replied, "The Father alone has the authority to set those dates and times, and they're not for you to know. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses, telling people about me everywhere, in Jerusalem, throughout Judea and Samaria, and even to the ends of the earth." Where did he want them to take this resurrection message? Beyond the confines of where they found their own comfort, beyond the confines of their own people, beyond the confines of their own lives. He wanted them to move out. And he wanted them to move out and share this resurrection message with who? Everybody. They were very limited in their thinking. But Jesus wanted to be incredibly inclusive with his invitation. If you follow the story in Acts chapter 2, the Spirit of God comes with great power, and an amazing movement. Believers began to experience the resurrection in a new way. In what way, you say? Well, for one, they began to be, out of their great diversity, they began to be unified, which you know is a miracle if you've spent any real time with people that are different than you and tried to get along. But there are these people who had come from all over, and they were gathered in this one place, and as the Spirit came and moved among them and dwelled within them, the Scriptures tell us that there began to be this great deal of unity that came out of their diversity. And then they began to be very generous with the stuff that they had. They began sharing their possessions. They began sharing their monies, giving huge tracts of land so that no one among them, zero, were poor. This is a powerful movement of God. Can you imagine that same movement going forward in our day? Where there would be no one who has lack. There would be no one who needed that wouldn't have provision in their life. The apostles began to experience the power of God as they touch people's lives. Those who are lame and cannot walk, they will be raised, their legs will be strengthened, and they will be able to walk and run and jump and leap. They will help to open the eyes of those who are blind. People's minds will be renewed and resurrected. Their lives will be changed. Relationships will be resurrected and made new. And all Jesus wants is for them to take what is happening in Jerusalem and to move beyond. But they're going to be very slow to do it. Why? Why are they going to be slow to do it? This great movement of God is happening. Amazing things are happening. Don't you want to share that when great things are happening with you? They are content because they're thinking about themselves. They're lost, they're stuck, and they don't even know it. There's great things happening around them. There's great things happening to them. But Jesus says, you are here. But where I want you to be is here. That's the backdrop of what I want to say to you as a people, as a community of grace. I've been here for Labor Day, 24 years. 24 years. And by and large, the vision that I have shared with you has been relatively the same. Of course, along the way, it takes a different shape or form, but the substance of it is basically the same. And this morning, what I want to do is I want to walk with you through the tenets of this vision, and I want you to hear it, and then I want you to interact with me on it. Because what I'm going to initially say to you, you're going to hear and you're going to think to yourself, most of you, you're going to think to yourself, yeah, that sounds good. That sounds about right. That sounds like something I would like to be a part of. But what you're not going to initially understand is that if you agree in principle to the things that you hear, it's going to cost you something. It inevitably always does. Because what I'm going to share with you is very supernatural in its origin. In order for it to take root in your hearts and in your lives, it's going to ask something of you. What did the vision that Jesus was giving to his disciples, the apostles, and others, what did it ask of them? It asked that they would take what they had and move beyond their own sphere of influence into a place that maybe wasn't as comfortable with people they didn't know, sharing this new life with them. And eventually, inevitably, that's what's going to happen with us. So as I share some of these things with you, I'm going to ask our two ushers, Joanne and Ellen, if you would, they're going to hand you an insert that has some of the things that I'm going to be sharing with you. And I want each of you to just take one of these, and I want you to just, you can hold on to it. You don't have to necessarily follow it along word for word, but I want you to have it mostly for what happens after you leave here. Now, against this backdrop of a vision that Jesus shares with his disciples is a vision that comes, I believe, from what God has given me to share with you. Now, our vision statement at Grace is that we are a community where transformation is continual, differences are celebrated, and love is central. But I want to unpack that. And as I unpack it, I'm going to interact with you on why it's important for you and I to be on the same page. So there are three concepts in the vision that I have for us as a community of faith. And one is that transformation, life change, is continual. And I'm going to walk with you through a few things that then we'll process in a minute. Grace is a community where people, all people, can come and be exposed to the Word of God in such a way that we can discover new purpose, worth, and power that's available to help us overcome our broken dreams, bad habits, and ingrained addictions. It's a place where growth and life change would be the norm for all of us, and not just an exception that the majority of us marvel at. It's a place where we're eager to learn, where we're humble and open to instruction and correction, so that we could stop making excuses and begin living into the best versions of ourselves. It's a place where we're not so easily offended, where unforgiveness is unwelcome and excuses have no place. It's a place where people come to contribute to a work, and their contribution is valued and vital, and not just a place where they're looking simply to consume a better product. It's a place where we become known as a people who know how to live well, how to love our spouses well, how to raise our children well, how to study well, how to face adversity well, how to run businesses and organizations well, and how to reach out to those on the margin well. So let me just stop for a second and ask you, does that sound like a community that you would like to be a part of? Is that relatively in the ballpark of what you think a new community, a church should be about? So if in principle you agree, then we should be doing this in an ongoing way. Life change and transformation should be happening in an ongoing way. But for many of us, there are places along the way that we would say, you know what, I feel stuck. I feel like I'm wrestling with the same stuff that I was wrestling with this time last year. I feel like maybe when pressed, I just make excuses about why I'm in the same spot. I want to get to point B, but I'm still stuck at point A. And I wonder what it is that I'm going to need to learn, what it is that I'm going to need to do in order for transformation to become real for me. Because truthfully, transformation doesn't happen to a group of people until it happens to an individual. And so if all of us are riding the transformation train, then there are things that should be happening in our lives, right? So as you think about the vision being made true in your own life, I wonder what it is that may be difficult for you. I wonder what maybe you have to unlearn. You know, sometimes before we learn things, we have to unlearn things. Sometimes before we can pick something up, we have to put something down. And some of us are carrying things that it just doesn't serve us well. And it's blocking our transformation. It's blocking our blessing. It's keeping us from God's best. We're lost and we don't even know it. We've settled for some lesser version because it's easier, because it's safer, because it's known. But on some level, we're going to have to come to a place where we look at our lives and we say, is this happening in me? Next, we're a community where our differences are celebrated. A place where everyone, regardless of their race, sex, socioeconomic status, beliefs, opinions, histories, backgrounds, would be genuinely welcome and included, invited to join us on a journey with God towards redemption and the formation of a new community. And in this new community, dialogue would be welcome and respect would be the rule, especially when the opinions and beliefs shared differ from the ones that you hold so dearly. There'd be no picking of sides or joining of camps. We'd be on the same side, all of us wanting the best for one another. Judgments and prejudices would be replaced with a desire to understand and a compassion to share one another's burdens. We'd be a place where forgiveness flowed freely and healing happened and the word relationship took on a new meaning. We'd be a place and a people who walk out a new and different way, not because our creeds tell us that we should, but because our hearts tell us that we must. Not because we're supposed to, but because we get to. And I want you to think about this because we do not live in a world, in a culture, at a time where differences are celebrated. We draw harsh lines of division. And if you're not in my camp, then we discount and even sometimes demonize. That is not our vision at Grace. There is no place for that in the kingdom of God. Jesus was wanting his disciples to move beyond the places where they felt comfortable, to go into the places where they would encounter people who thought differently, who looked differently, who acted differently, and to give them this same resurrection gift that he had given to them. To give them good news, to embody the good news. And I want you to think about, I don't know how it sounds to you, maybe in principle, I know how it sounds to me, but as you're hearing those things, in principle, something has to change in us for that to occur. We're going to be swimming against the tide. This is not going to be easy to do. We are surrounded by a culture that absolutely moves in the opposite direction. But the vision that I'm calling to you is a higher vision. It's going to call the absolute best from you. And I wonder what it's going to take, what it's going to cost you to get to a place where you actually could celebrate the differences of someone you abjectly disagree with, but that you would still have love in your heart and concern for their well-being, regardless of their politics or their life philosophies or however it is that they interpret the Scriptures different from you. It's a place where transformation is continual. It's a place where differences are celebrated. And finally, it's a place where love is central. And if love is central, that means nothing else can be. Right? You can't tack it onto the periphery and think that somehow it's enough. It must be central. We're to be a community where love never gives up. It never loses faith. It's always hopeful and endures through every circumstance. A place where the Spirit of God guides and directs and empowers all of us. And as we're governed by love, that we would be concerned not only about our own members, but also just as passionately about those who don't yet belong to us. A place where ambassadors are raised up, visible instruments of Christ's presence in this world, reflections of His grace to the poor and downtrodden, addicted, imprisoned, disabled, and sick, to the hungry and homeless, becoming a voice for those who don't have one. A people who daily represent Christ well by doing justice and loving mercy and walking humbly with their God. A community that doesn't distort the gospel message or confuse people about who God is and what He wants by how we live, but rather we're a light in the darkness providing clarity and hope for all who are in need. We're a people willing to take risk and make sacrifices when sacrifice is called for. And as we come in and receive, we don't forget to faithfully disperse and scatter across our towns and counties and states and country and world as emissaries of a God who gave us a message that must be embodied and shared wherever we go. Resurrection has to happen. If it's going to happen at all, it needs to happen on a grand scale. It doesn't stop in a graveyard in Jerusalem. It moves out. And as it moves out, it impacts you and it impacts me. And as it impacts you and it impacts me, it must impact our families. It must impact this church. It must impact the way in which we live our lives, or it will be meaningless. And I just wonder, with a clear vision about who we are and what we're to be about, I just wonder how that feels to you. Because sometimes the things that I want the most seem the most difficult to get to because there's stuff in my life that actually block it from taking place. But I've become too comfortable or too afraid or too embarrassed or too something to realize it. And what I thought, and we've left a few minutes on the other side of what I'm sharing with you, for me to dialogue with you, for me to take some questions, for me to interact with you, because if this is going to be significant, it's going to have to be something that we are embracing as a people. It can't be me, it can't be a few of us, it's got to be all of us. And I just wonder, as you hear that spelled out, perhaps that's new to you, or perhaps you've heard it before, but whatever the case, I'm just wondering what questions you have as you think about your own life and about what it's going to cost you for that to actually happen in your life. Because if it doesn't happen in your life, it's not going to happen in our life. So let's just talk for a few minutes about the real challenges that either transformation or the celebration of differences or love being central cause us. But let's not just be theoretical about it. If I could ask you to be honest and vulnerable enough to say, here's where I know this would be good, but here's where I struggle. Here's where I'm challenged. This is a growth point for me. This is a place where I need to learn. This is a place where I need to be open to God moving me beyond the places where I'm comfortable. So if you're willing to do that, I'd love to hear from you. Let's just talk for a few minutes. Let's just work this out together as a community. Next week, what we're going to talk about is that these early disciples, if you read all the way through the book of Acts 1 through 7, they received this great movement of God. God is moving in powerful ways among them, but they will not move beyond the confines of where they're comfortable until something terrible happens. And that becomes a catalyst for leading them out into the places where God really called them to be. So where do you feel the tension, either in this aspect of transformation or celebration of difference or love being central? Where do you feel tension in this personally? Lorraine.
On the fourth bullet point, a place where we are not so easily offended.
Yeah.
I've been in church for a long time, and the church is generally easily offended. So how do we get there when we have such differences with regards to what direction, like how do we, as a group, become people who can really listen and not be offended when we disagree?
Yeah. Yeah, the question is about how do we get to a place where we're not so easily offended? If I don't need to be right, then I don't get easily offended. It's only when I have to defend my right that I put up a strong offense against you. But if I love you, if love is central in my heart, I can still disagree with you and still have respect and dialogue. I'm still open to learning. Why? Because I don't know everything. When we get to some place where we just are closed, where there are no more open categories in our brain to learn from people who are different than us, we're lost and we don't know it. So if you can identify and say, you know what, I'm pretty easily offended. That's a hard recognition. Most of the time we can see it in other people far easier than we see it in our own lives. But if we're willing to be honest with ourselves and say, what's that about, God? Why am I so easily offended these days? And sometimes it's not like all the time, but it might just be this season of your life. Chances are, if you work that out in prayer, God will give you insight as to what that's about. But I have to first acknowledge, you know what? I'm irritable. I'm on edge. I'm just looking for somebody to say something wrong. It's kind of like you're looking for a fight. And in the kingdom of God, if love is central, there's no need to fight with your brother or sister. At the end of the day, if your differences are significant enough, if the divide is different enough, you can still love and bless and move on. But you don't have to hold hardness of heart, because that doesn't serve anybody well. When you get to a place where you are living in offense or taking up other people's offenses, it's corroding your own soul. So we just have to, if I don't have to be right, which is a big deal, right? If I don't have to be right, then I can let things go. I don't have to be offended. We should be the least offendable people as Christ followers. Carrie.
Yeah, I'm really good at starting things, and gun hauling and all that, but I lose heart, I lose energy, and I hit the tough spots, it's easy to just give up. So I start well, but I'm not a good finisher.
In many of these things, you're talking about starting well and not finishing. God wants to give us insight about our own lives. Because if transformation is going to occur and there's something that's blocking that, God would want us to see that. Because God's grand design is that the resurrection would take root in you and me and beyond. So, if I start things but I don't finish things, and I see that as a pattern, I'm going to take that to God and I'm going to say, God, what's that about? Right? This is a part of our relationship with God where we're interacting and we're seeking understanding. We're putting ourselves in a position where we can hear the voice of God and understand, you know what? The reason that you're this way is, and God will show us. And perhaps there are a few trusted people in our lives that if we don't have insight, that might give us that insight also. But if we're open to learning, it's a big if, but like if we're open to learning, if we don't know it all, if we haven't arrived, then we can remain humble. and teachable, which is really what we should all be all the time.
I
Crystal.
feel like I assume that people don't want to be bothered or spoken to.
Mhm.
So I tend to like walk past people without really speaking to them.
Yeah.
Especially if they're new, like they're not so comfortable to confront them and say,
Yeah.
hello. I think I keep it short, but I feel like having a conversation with people can make people feel like they belong.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there may well be some people who don't want to be bothered. I mean, that might be true. So I have to, when I wake up every day, and when you wake up every day, our life is about choices. It's about decisions that we make. It's about commitments that I'm giving my life to. And if I have something really, really good in my life that I want to share, there's a variety of ways that I can share that. I don't go stand on a corner with a bullhorn, right, in one hand and a Bible in another. I don't think that's the most effective way. But I do think there's something to living a life of meaning and purpose and value, which Christ gives us. And as we live that life out and we're asking God, help me today to see where it is that you have appointments for me, where you have literally planned in my day, and if I'm awake, if I'm aware, that you can help me see. Because most of the time, God is appointing, He is guiding, He is directing if we want to be guided and directed. That's what it means to have value and purpose and worth. He's trying to take these disciples and help them to look beyond their own lives and to see a world of people beyond them who could use a smile, a kind word, something that draws them to the presence of Christ in you. Yeah, Bill.
Something you said about that one true was sometimes to pick something up, I should put something down.
Yeah.
I was only pick some things up, put things down, and then also not too many things. And I go from the joy to do it or happiness to resentment that I have on this thing.
Yeah. I don't think you're alone in that regard.
Bill, I put things down all the time and pick them back up at the end of the day. It's this constant cycle and needing to be remembered or reminded, both by myself and by the Holy Spirit in me and by others. Asking others for help. I was thinking about Carrie. That's what we're here for. And when you ask God at the start of the day to show you who it is He wants you to be in touch with,
Yeah.
then He'll give you the strength.
Rachel.
In regards to transformation, what you were talking about blocks, I think for me, a lot of it is I have a lot of social groups, and in many of them, they're just outright atheists. I mean, not only are they agnostics, they do completely do not agree with God, Jesus. They think it's a fantasy.
Yeah.
And that's uncomfortable where I'm at, but it's like daily I feel like I'm losing another friend. And I struggle with that, and I think that has kept me from transforming even more than I have since I've been here. But so that's kind of just been really hard to, because I find myself kind of wavering.
Yeah.
But at some point, you kind of state your views and you stick with them, but it feels like a sacrifice a lot.
Yeah, I think to be a Christ follower is costly on some level. But learning from the best, Jesus was never so discouraged that it kept him from continuing on. He loved people who rejected him. He loved people who crucified him. He found in his heart a place for love to be so central that as he lived that out, he wanted to not only embody and share that good news message, he wanted people of all stripes and sizes and shapes and colors from all places to experience and to know the same power that dwelled in his life for them to have. And when they rejected it or they didn't want it, he just moved on. But it didn't cause him to stop doing what his Father sent him to do. And I think that's the message that he's saying to his disciples. Listen, it's going to cost you greatly. But it's worth what you will have to pay. So, here's the thing, and I'm just going to wrap it up. I just want you to process. I want you to take the inserts home. I want you to ask the question, what grand movement will need to take place in my life in order for it to align with this vision? Because this is the kind of church that I would like to be a part of. This is the kind of church, kind of community I would like to contribute to. But we are here, and yet there is some gap between where we are and where we want to be. Here's what I don't want to happen. I don't want to spend what is the better part of the remainder of my life lost and not knowing it. I don't want to waste days and weeks and months out of alignment with the purposes for which I was made. And I don't want that for this community. So as I look at the areas of transformation, I look at the areas of celebration of difference, and I look at the areas of love being central, I just want you to really be processing this week, what is it that keeps me from being in lockstep with this? And just be honest about it. Is it something I even want to be about? And if it is, what am I prepared to do to move beyond where I'm currently at? Because transformation will not happen in us until it happens in you and in me. We will not as a community celebrate differences until you as an individual and I as an individual do it. And love will not be central until it is central in our own lives and hearts. Then we can collectively come together and be a powerful force for good, which is really the reason for which we were made. The early disciples were content to stay in places that were comfortable. And Jesus said, I just need you to know, if I'm going to entrust this great gift to you, you've got to go beyond where you're comfortable into the places that I call you. Because there are people like you that you don't even yet know that need what you have, and you're going to be the person to give it to them. And that's a mighty, powerful thing to entrust to someone, but He's entrusting it to you and me. So I want you to think about that as we close in prayer. Lord, let us not go through the motions. Let us not settle for some lesser, mediocre version of the life you have given to us. Help us to understand the power and the glory and the call that is on our lives. And help us to have the courage to let go of the things that keep us from your best. We eagerly anticipate a movement of your Spirit among us. Help us to be open. Help us to be available. Help us to let go of our excuses and our fears. Help us to be ready and aligned with your good purposes in our own lives and in the life of this community of faith. And in advance, Lord, from the youngest among us to the oldest, we will give you thanks as we pour out our lives for something greater than our own, for the sake of your kingdom. and it coming on this earth as it is in the heavens. And it's in Christ that we pray. Amen. Please stand with me.